Thank you. Good afternoon, or yeah, it is afternoon, I suppose, and happy Independence Day. Happy 4th of July. Thank you for coming. It's wonderful to see you here. I am Mrs. Stephen Fay today, Sarah Fay, and I'm going to introduce my husband, Stephen Fay, who's going to be reading you some wonderful news from the city of Philadelphia. And let me just, by way of explanation, make a few remarks in advance. Obviously, today is the day we are celebrating the Declaration of Independence, which was ratified by the Continental Congress and signed by 56 of the delegates of that Congress, representing each of the 13 colonies at the time. Now, the Congress had charged a committee of 5, and those people were John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, Robert Livingston, and Roger Sherman, with drafting a formal document that would declare to Britain and to the world that we now considered ourselves an independent, sovereign nation. John Adams and his wife, Abigail, endured his long absences from home by maintaining a voluminous correspondence between them. 10 years or more, he's away from home making history. She's keeping the home fires burning. Now, Abigail was pretty politically astute herself and had earlier in the year 1776, in a letter to her husband, encouraged him to press for freedom for all. And I will read an excerpt from her letter to John. Abigail Adams from Braintree, Massachusetts, March 31st, 1776. I have sometimes been ready to think that the passion for liberty cannot be equally strong in the breasts of those who have been accustomed to deprive their fellow creatures of theirs. Of this, I am certain that it is not founded upon that generous and Christian principle of doing to others as we would that others do unto us. I long to hear that you have declared an independency. And by way of the new code of laws, which I suppose it will be necessary for you to make, I desire that you would remember the ladies and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors. Do not put such unlimited power into the hands of the husbands. Remember, all men would be tyrants if they could. If particular care and attention is not paid to the ladies, we are determined to foment a rebellion and will not hold ourselves bound by any laws in which we have no voice or representation. John thought her remarks mildly amusing. Now, the declaration having been made, John Adams didn't think that July 4th was the day to celebrate. Rather, it should be July 2nd. He wrote his wife from Philadelphia on July 3rd, 1776, and I will read the excerpt from his letter. Time has been given for the whole people maturely to consider the great question of independence and to ripen their judgments, dissipate their fears, and allure their hopes by discussing it in newspapers and pamphlets, by debating it in assemblies, conventions, committees of safety and inspection, in town and country meetings, as well as in private conversations, so that the whole people in every colony of the 13 have now adopted it as their own act. This will cement the Union and avoid those heats and perhaps convulsions which might have been occasioned by such a declaration 6 months ago. But the day is past. The second day of July 1776 will be the most memorable epoch in the history of America. I am apt to believe that it will be celebrated by succeeding generations as the great anniversary festival. It ought to be commemorated as the day of deliverance by solemn acts of devotion to God Almighty. It ought to be solemnized with pomp and parade, with shows, games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations from one end of this continent to the other, from this time forward evermore. You think me transported with enthusiasm, but I am not. I am well aware of the toil and blood and treasure that it will cost us to maintain this declaration and support and defend these states. Yet, through all the gloom, I can see the rays of ravishing light and glory. I can see that the end is more than worth all the means, and that posterity will triumph in that day's transaction, even although we should rue it, which I trust in God we shall not. When was the last time you ever had somebody write you a letter that says, rays of ravishing light and glory? Very, very colorful language they used back then. So why did John Adams favor July 2nd as Independence Day? Because it was on July 2nd, 1776, that delegates at the Second Continental Congress meeting in Philadelphia officially separated the 13 colonies from Britain by approving a motion for independence advanced by Richard Henry Lee of Virginia. 12 of the 13 colonies approved it. New York abstained, as its representatives did not have permission to vote for it at that time. Later that day, the Pennsylvania Evening Post published the following notice. This is on July 2nd. This day, the Continental Congress declared the United Colonies free and independent states. So, why do we celebrate July 4th as Independence Day? That's when the actual Declaration of Independence, the document, whose principal author was Thomas Jefferson, was adopted, though not signed, by members of the Continental Congress. So, first, a resolution, next, the actual document. Jefferson had been writing it draft after draft in his rooms in Philadelphia alone between June 11th and June 28th. Now, even John Hancock didn't affix his flourishing signature at the bottom until August 2nd, 1776, along with most of the other 56. Some, including New York and New Hampshire delegates, didn't sign until several months later. Nevertheless, on July 8th, the city of Philadelphia, where the declaration was eventually signed, held a parade and the firing of guns to mark the moment. It wasn't until July 9th that the Continental Army, under the leadership of George Washington, heard the news from Washington himself. As for the British government in London, it was unaware that the United States had declared independence until August. Things moved slower in those days. So it was on the 4th of July, 1776, that they began to adopted the Declaration of Independence. Signing happened after. Now, I am going to take this moment to introduce Mr. Stephen Fay, who has heard about this wonderful document that has been adopted in Philadelphia and is going to read it to the people in the group. Thank you.
Does this work? Haha. Back in my day, you just use a voice. I may go back to my day. All right. Thank you, bride. Well, this printing that I received today was published by Mary Catherine Goddard. She was a publisher of the, the Maryland Journal. So she was the first woman who published this document for everyone. And she not only put all the people's names who signed it, she signed it herself. In Congress, July 4, 1776, the unanimous Declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among those the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impelled them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused to assent to laws the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden the governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operations till his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of people. He has refused for a long time, after such dissolutions, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states for that purpose, obstructing the laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept among us, in times of peace, standing armies without the consent of the legislatures. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burned our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous of ages, and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high sea to bear arms against their country, to become the executioner of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves at their hands. He has excited domestic insurrection amongst us, and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They, too, have been deaf to the voice of justice and consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, friends in peace. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress, assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have the full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things that independent states have a right to do. And for the support of this declaration, and with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Thank you.
And at this time, we are honored to have the Green Mountain Boys here, who will fire a musket salute in honor of the Declaration of Independence. Green Mountain Boys?
Every able-bodied man from the age of 16 to 60 would serve in the militia. We wear no uniforms. We wear what people would have worn in the 18th century. Because we are a citizen militia, we are not perfect in our actions, but we train regularly together to do the best we can. And what we will do in the coming years is prove that a citizen militia can free our country from the reins of Great Britain. They are not the most reliable form of firearm. If we are lucky, at least one will go off in the 2 volleys we plan to fire. Company, take care. Company, rest muskets. 1, 2, 3. Company, shoulder muskets. 1, 2. Company, left base. Company,
else is trying to shoot them.
Boys, when ready? Make ready. Full cut. Hammer saws off. Present. Fire!
Mike? Test it? Nope, nope. It is on. You gotta turn it up. Thank you. Thank you for coming today. This concludes our reading of the Declaration. We will be riding downtown to the Town Hall where the bell ringing will commence shortly. Thank you so much again for coming. Bye-bye.
My name is Mike Day. I am the president of the Bennington Rotary Club. Welcome to our 4th of July bell ringing ceremony. We thank you for joining us for Bennington Rotary's part of the ceremony with the Friends of Bennington Monument on this Independence Day. In addition to our usual ceremony, we also have Mike and Phyllis Chapman, who have joined us after their appearance at the Bennington Battle Monument. They're dressed in Revolutionary era garb and can answer any questions you might have about how people lived back then. They'll be with us throughout the event, so feel free to ask them questions after our bell ringing is complete. After the ceremony, please take the opportunity to visit our table on my right. Here at the Bennington Club, we're offering some souvenirs for sale to support our charitable programs and to prepare for the upcoming 250th anniversary of the Battle of Bennington. It's fitting that we recognize that the Founding Fathers, the Founding Fathers did that July 4th in 1776 when they put their signatures on the Declaration of Independence. Thomas Jefferson knew the importance of the document that he wrote, and he encouraged his countrymen to celebrate that day and every July 4th thereafter. Since the beginning of our bell ringing ceremonies, Rotarian Shep Jones has led us in the singing of the national anthem and various patriotic songs. Unfortunately, Shep passed away shortly after our ceremony last year. Shep would have been overjoyed to know that a young person from the high school has taken over this important part of this program. Joining us today is Zoe Zazzaro, a member of the Mount Union Chorale Group. Hopefully she can make it an annual tradition to have Zoe or one of her fellow students present the musical part of future bell ringing ceremonies. Please remove your hats as Zoe leads us in the singing of our national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's dawn's early light, what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you very much, Zoe. Would everyone now please face the flag for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We thank you all for your efforts as citizens of Bennington to help make our town a great place to live. In 1963, both houses of Congress passed concurrent resolution number 25, which reads, whereas the tolling of the Liberty Bell at Independence Hall, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon of the 4th day of July, 1776, proclaimed the signing of the Declaration of Independence, and whereas the adoption of this historic document marked the birth of our country as a free and independent nation, and whereas it is fitting that the anniversary of this great event should be appropriately observed in each year at the same moment throughout the United States. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Congress hereby declares that the anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence should be observed each year by the ringing of bells throughout the United States at the hour of 2 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time in the afternoon of the 4th day of July, or at such other time on the day as may be determined by local authority, and call upon civic and other community leaders to take appropriate steps to encourage the public participation in such observance. Once again, we welcome Zoe Zazzaro to lead us in the singing of God Bless America.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America.
Thank you very much once again, Zoe. Bells were once the fastest means of communication in any town. While this has certainly changed, we are fortunate to still have churches and others that have bells that are in working order. U.S. Navy ships also have bells, used for signaling, keeping time, and sounding alarms. Bells are an important part of a ship's routine and readiness. Our bell comes from the USS Bennington, an aircraft carrier that served our nation from 1944 through 1970. Ordered by the Navy just 8 days after the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, the USS Bennington was built at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. For 2 years in the Second World War, this bell rang as the ship operated throughout the Pacific Theater. It rang as planes launched from its deck to support soldiers and Marines as they stormed the beaches of Iwo Jima and Okinawa. Throughout the Cold War, this bell rang as the USS Bennington patrolled the world's oceans, from the Atlantic to the Mediterranean and back to the Pacific again. In 1964, this bell rang as 20 Marine helicopters were launched from the USS Bennington to provide disaster relief to the people of Northern California, who experienced the worst flood in their history. In 1967, the bell rang as the ship recovered the unmanned Apollo 4 spacecraft after it splashed down in the Pacific Ocean after a successful mission which tested the systems that would soon send men to the moon. The bell fell silent in 1970 as the USS Bennington was placed out of commission with the Pacific Reserve Fleet. Joining the Bennington Rotarians to ring the ship's bell is our district governor, Bill Stevens, and our assistant district governor, Diane McCormick. Thank you for being a part of our annual celebration. Our Rotarians will now ring the bell 13 times, once for each of the original states. Ringing for Delaware, Bill Stevens. Ringing for Pennsylvania, Mary Canavan. Ringing for New Jersey, Jay Zwenenberg, Dana Rozicki. Ringing for Georgia, Diane McCormick. Ringing for Connecticut, Clark Adams. Ringing for Massachusetts, Mary Morrissey. Ringing for Maryland, Tom Lenkowski. Ringing for South Carolina, John Gagnon. Ringing for New Hampshire, Carol Moore. Ringing for Virginia, Sarah Perrin. Ringing for New York, Kathy Solian. Ringing for North Carolina, Mike Nigro. Ringing for Rhode Island, Kathy McClure. As I am sure many of you know, Vermont is the 14th state in the Union. The state of Vermont was born right here in Bennington. So it is only fitting that we ring our bell one more time for Vermont. To ring the bell for the 14th time, and for Vermont, our club always selects a group or individual that is outstanding in our community. Past recipients chosen as the 14th bell ringer include the Bennington Elks Lodge, Old Castle Theater, the Bennington Historical Society, the Bennington Rescue Squad, the Vermont National Guard, the North Bennington Village School, the MAU Chamber Singers, and Patricia Johnson, a registered nurse at the Southern Vermont Medical Center. This year, we are proud to have with us, to ring the bell for Vermont, Lieutenant Jasmine Hollister of the Bennington Fire Department. The Bennington Fire Department was founded in 1950. By 1951, 2 fire companies had been organized, and by the turn of the century, there were 5 fire companies. At this time, fire apparatus included hand-pulled or hand or steam pumped engines that carried large tubs of water and hose carts. Water mains were installed in Bennington in 1885 and 1886. This eliminated the need for the water engines and reduced the number of fire companies to 4. A town-wide alarm system was installed in 1891. In 1917, Bennington purchased its first motorized hose wagons, and in 1928, a motorized hook and ladder truck. In August 1997, because Bennington's 4 existing firehouses were not of sufficient size to hold the large fire trucks of today, the fire companies were consolidated at 1 new fire location. In 2022, the fire department celebrated 25 years in the new consolidated station. In 2023, the fire department took delivery of a new ladder truck. This past year, the Bennington Fire Department responded to 303 calls for service. In addition to calls for service, members of the Bennington Fire Department conducted fire safety courses for area youth, as well as senior citizens, instructing 125 students. Representing the Bennington Fire Department are Lieutenant Jasmine Hollister and the Fire Chief Nathan Barris. Would you please come forward to the podium? Both of you. We have a plaque that I shall read to present to the Bennington Fire Department. And it reads as follows. The Bennington Rotary Club presents to the Bennington Fire Department the 14th Bell Ringer Award for outstanding service to our community this July 4th, 2024.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
If you look at me. Thank you.
Pardon? And now we would ask Jasmine, Lieutenant Hollister, to please ring the bell for the 14th time. In honor of today's bell ringing ceremony, we would like to close with a musket salute conducted by members of the Green Mountain Boys Reenactment Company.
While we await our fourth member who's getting his musket, I would like to remind everyone that the Second Amendment reads, for the purpose of a well-regulated militia, the right to bear arms shall not be infringed. That amendment is a recognition of the important role that the militia played in the Revolutionary War. The Green Mountain Boys started the militia at everyone aged 16 to 60 as a member of the militia. As such, we don't wear uniforms, we wear the regular clothes that people were born in the 18th century. It also means while we are not perfect in our actions, although we do our best. I would also mention that we use muskets, which means they are not the most reliable. And our hope is that at least one will go off for each of the 2 volleys that we plan to fire. Sit there. Press muskets. Shoulder muskets. Left base. All citizens on this side of National Campground to our right, please. Everyone to the left. After Rotarian and to the right, you people to the side. Yeah, right, left face. Hold your musket. Prime and load position. Half-cock muskets, if not already. Handle of cartridges. Prime band. Load stands when ready. Cast the bell. Load musket. Boys, when ready? Boys, muskets, when ready? Hold tight. Reset musket. Fire.
Thank you, Green Mountain Boys. As we conclude our formal part of the ceremony, those wishing to ring the bell, please form a line in front of the bell and you will be handed the lanyard at your turn. I would like at this time for Trudy Paulin to be first in that group so that she may ring the bell. This year she is working toward her citizenship and we congratulate her. Thank you, Trudy.
Huzzah!
Those who wish to ring the bell, everybody is welcome. Please form a line. Thank you for coming today to our 4th of July bell ringing ceremony. Have a great holiday.